Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphenate with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphenate listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now.
No, you just have like a kick drum and a really distorted sound, and that's like all you need to like make people go crazy.
What's happening? Thanks so much for tuning into Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, January 30th, 2025. The end of video game month is coming to a close. This is it. Our last episode, the fifth Thursday of the month that I have so much was not expecting, but I was able to pull through a really incredible guest. I'm sure you've seen the title of the episode already, but it was something that I had a few friends help me put together. Thank you, Jeff Rosenberg. Thank you, Brian Chippendale. I got Brian Gibson, the other Brian, the other half of Lightning Bolt, the bass half of Lightning Bolt, who I didn't even know when I started this month, is a renowned video game designer. I think Marcus Savino let me know this and said, "Oh, you gotta have Gibson on," and he doesn't do a lot of interviews. I found out, and was feeling a little bit like, I don't know what's this all about, and it was cool. It's a great interview. I was really stoked to talk to him, and I think is a perfect way to cap off the Hyphenate video game month. He created an incredible game called Thumper. That's like a rhythm-based game. You can find out more about it at thumpergame.com. You can also find out more about Lightning Bolt at their website, laserbeast.com. Yeah, Gibson was awesome. I feel like he's definitely the quieter one of the duo. I know how that goes, being in a duo band myself. There's usually somebody who does a lot of the talking and somebody who doesn't do as much talking. But Brian was really sweet, and it was really great getting to talk to him for a long time. I feel like we could have talked for 2 more hours. But it's really interesting. This whole world of the overlapping of the video game world, the music world, the creative world. I mean, it's something I would assume had happened, but I think I was really kind of unfamiliar with a lot of that development and what's been going on in video games in the last 20 years. And it's a lot. It's a huge creative world out there, stuff on all kinds of levels of things. So, it was exciting. This was a fun, informal or informational, it's rather formal digging in. I didn't even know. That's the one thing, not knowing that much of video games. I don't even know what kind of questions to ask. I think we end up talking a lot more about music with all of my guests, and the video game side, I think, still can be investigated further with these. If you have any good video game recommendations for me, I would love to hear more about what the world of video games have to offer. You can write me at hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. You can also find me on the Instagram at Randy S. Randall. And really, it's been a fun way to kick off this year, putting my head in the sand to some degree, and looking at video games, investigating distraction techniques from what's been going on. Obviously, there is a lot going on in the world. You got the wildfires. We're still, recovering from. Southern California is, I think, has really been hit. Obviously, that's an understatement, but the amount of work is becoming clear, and I think the recovery efforts and cleanup has begun. So that's good here. And then, all this other, I don't know, Jesus Christ, federal nonsense. It's just horrific. And it's just getting started. My God, we're almost done with this first month. And man, this 2025 has been kicking my ass already. So, let's see what the rest of the year will bring. We have 11 months more to go. I have more guests, have more stuff happening here. But I would love to hear from everybody who listens to the show. Let me know what you're doing to get through this 2025, how you are coping, how you are, finding those little moments of peace in this world. And I'm happy you're here. Let your friends know the show's fun, or the show is whatever the show is. If you like the show, if you think it's fun, let them know. And we'll keep chugging on here. Happy to be part of the conversation. And here is my conversation with the one and only incomparable Brian Gibson. Brian Gibson, welcome to Hyphenate. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Good. I'll act like we're just now introducing each other. Like we haven't been talking before the mics were running. Like I was telling you before we started recording, your name has come up several times in conversation with musicians who are active in the video game space. So like, well, of course you have to talk to Brian Gibson. And I'm like, oh, I would love to talk to Brian Gibson, but I don't know. We played a handful of shows together many, many years ago that stand out in my memory from early days of sleeping on floors in New Orleans and
oh
in
God,
the South.
Wait, when was the New Orleans one?
This was the band that Dean and I had before No Age. It was called Wives. We played at a big warehouse. This would have been 2003, I think. We opened for you and USA's a Monster. We were the first of three. It was us, USA's a Monster, and then Lightning Bolt. We played. I'm
trying because I have a few memories of sleeping on the floor in New Orleans.
This would have been one of those. I forget. Brian Funk, I think, was the promoter or the warehouse guy. Do you remember him? He was really nice.
No. Oh. Yeah, that's so long ago.
It was many, many years ago. But yeah, we played there, and then I think we played in Atlanta, like at a proper club. Remember the backstage was just like another bar. It was like put us up in a bar behind a bar.
Yeah.
And then there was one other one too, maybe Florida or something.
Good times.
One of many, many, many shows, but those stand out to me. I think it's that feeling of just like, the excitement and the sweat. I think is probably what I remember the most. Everybody's really excited and really sweaty.
Yeah, it's been decades of excitement and sweat. It's crazy. I can't believe it's not slowing down.
You have a life built on excitement and sweat. The Lightning Bolt story. A very special episode.
For those brief moments on tour, which is like 2 months of the year max, and then the rest of the time it's me on the computer.
A fairly normal life. It's kind of like a strange like Clark Kent sort of situation. Where
I guess so.
Instead of a daily change into costume. But you never really wore a costume as opposed to your bandmate. He seemed to sort of had more of a
I did in the beginning. Ranger.
Okay. What were your costumes like?
They were kind of similar to Brian's. I would like wear, a hat with holes cut in it, or just various like homemade masks that were similar to Brian's, but I think I got really sensitive to this feeling of being pigeonholed, or I didn't like that it was feeling like a shtick. I didn't like that we were like Mexican wrestlers, or like there's just all of these associations with it. I didn't like the expectation. I think in general, I get more annoyed when people have like an expectation of me or something. And
Dance, at some point, do the thing, do the performance.
And it's weird because I think my performance got way, more boring because I just was like, I'm just going to be me. But I think it was almost part of it was also my relationship with Brian, and that I really wanted to be separate from him or something. I wanted us to be our own independent, like
be your own Brian
contributors.
Yeah.
And so it's weird. We kind of just, in the beginning, I think I was very influenced by him, and like we were both kind of like a team or something, trying to sort of develop this presentation. But then at some point it was like, no, Brian has his presentation and I have mine, and they're actually like very different from each other, and we're very different people from each other, and that's what this band is. And yeah, it took a little while for for it to evolve into that. But it was probably the first 5 years that we played together that I was still kind of wearing masks and feeling a little just like not creatively satisfied doing that or something.
It's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I play in a duo for, going on over a decade, going into 2 decades. And it's a whole thing. It's hard to explain to people that I think, especially people that play in bands or people that don't play in bands, that just a 2-person arrangement is something closer to like a relationship. It's like a business. It's a friendship and something almost like a marriage as well, where it's like a really, I think when I've been in bands with more people, it becomes more of this kind of like a clique or something. Everyone will team up with one side or the other side against each other. But with the 2 people, it's really kind of just like, well, if one of us isn't into this, then it's not really working. So we have to really sort of like work on communication. Or at least that's what Dean and I have had to do over the years. And someone ends up always, there has to be some sort of compromise where both people sacrifice something for the deal to be right. Nobody can be exactly happy. If both people are equally miserable, then it means it worked. But
yeah, and it seems like the course of those duos is like a relationship. At least in my experience, there's kind of this like infatuation period in the beginning where everything is perfect. And like probably, I mean, I thought Brian was like, the best drummer in the world. He probably still is, but like, it's just like neither of you can do any wrong. Like everything is just kind of exciting and fresh and new. And then there's definitely a distinct period with us where it was like the power struggle. It was like, wait a minute, who's in charge here? And I never think of myself as someone who I'm always pretty flexible and can be kind of passive and I'm pretty good at working with people. But I think we really had like a period of like egos clashing in a weird way. It's hard to describe how, because he's much more like extroverted and sort of outwardly expressive, and I kind of like keep things to myself. And there's just a weird dynamic going on for a while that was pretty tense. And I think of it as like a power struggle, that it was like, who's calling the shots here? And eventually, like a good relationship, it kind of arrived at a sort of compromise where now everything's fine. It's like we've given each other, we have boundaries and we give each other space. So we respect what each other contributes, but like, we express our opinions, but it doesn't blow up as much as it used to. Those kinds of things used to blow up pretty frequently.
Well, I think it's hard. It's hard because in a band or in any kind of artistic expression, it's necessary for at least one person to have a vision. And if you're lucky or unlucky, 2 people have a vision, meaning kind of a goal or ambition or sort of a plan, because mostly it goes unspoken. Of like, where do I see this? I want to manifest this thing. I want to create this thing out of nothing. And if one's vision isn't in line with the other, then you're fighting over this thing that doesn't feel like an internal thing, or it's not this isn't a representation of me, but it's like, it's my art. It's worse, or it's more than. It's like, if this is just about me, like I don't give a fuck about me, but you're fucking with my art. Like, this is the thing I care the most about. I've sacrificed and dedicated so much time and effort to this thing. And now someone else is going to start driving that, you taking your art off a cliff, and like, fuck you. There's more of an ownership or sense of defense, or at least speaking personally for myself, that I have. Yeah. And when you realize that trust of something, it's not just you're sharing your life or sharing a meal or sharing a car, which you do all those things ad nauseum with the other person. But when you really trust somebody to participate in your artistic expression, that's the thing that where for me, I found myself being most hurt, if someone didn't get it or wanted to do something I didn't think was appropriate. But it was so hard to really put that into words. I couldn't really understand that. Like, I didn't understand why I was so hurt. And so it like hurt me personally in this weird way that wasn't like making fun of my shoes or my haircut or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff doesn't really matter, but I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I know. Yeah, I know exactly that vulnerability. You're so vulnerable with the other person, and then like, I had this idea, and then they're just like, no. Yeah. Brian and I were like weirdly pretty aligned creatively in a lot of ways, but yeah, there was a lot of like, there's definitely a lot of that where we would hurt each other's feelings, and I felt like my feelings were hurt a lot, but it was interesting. Like, I mean, the one thing that we were really aligned on was that we just didn't want to sound like anything else. Like, and we could both agree that, if this sounded like something someone else had already done before, we threw it in the trash. And that, for both of us, I think was like maybe the first time we had been in a band like that. Like for me and for him, I think we had been in bands with people that are like, I want to be in like a punk band, or I want to play in a band that sounds like this other thing or these reference points. And with Brian, it was just like, your drumming's really cool. We got to make something that's like, that lives up to like how original your drumming is. And I think he felt the same way. I mean, I don't know how he saw me, but maybe as just someone that was like open to anything and and like turning it into something original. At least that was what I really wanted to do, and I think he picked up on that, and that's probably why he wanted to keep playing with me over other people. Because there was a period where I was like competing with other people that were playing with Brian, and I wasn't sure exactly why. He did seem like he kept coming back to our jams, and I wasn't sure what I was doing that was like standing out, but I think it might have been that.
Really staunchly being committed to not sounding like anything else that that you'd heard before.
Yeah, I was like, really, it was pretty serious business for me to like listen to what he was doing and try to come up with some like new thing, because his drumming was a new thing to me, and like it wasn't like, oh, let's turn that into this thing I've, like a twist on something I've heard before. It's like, no, let's tear down music history to nothing and like build it up again or something. I don't know.
It's incredible. It's a form of abstraction, I think, in a way, or something more akin to art than into, pop song making, or even avant-garde, I don't know. It doesn't really help to put the words to it, but the idea of not necessarily having a roadmap of where you're going is like, makes it the task of writing music Herculean in context, where there is no context. You know what I mean? I interviewed David Pajo from Slint, and he expressed something kind of similar when, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Slint, but when they started, the idea was that there were a lot of bands in Louisville that sounded, like Joy Division, or sounded like post-punk, or a punk band, or a hardcore band, or a metal band. And they kind of came together with a similar sort of idea of like, let's make something that sounds like nothing else that's happening in our town. And I can relate to that feeling, but that is such a hard thing to do that only, I think, people in their late teens, early 20s would even think to do. The balls and naivete and overconfidence of just like, want to create new music. Okay.
I know, and I think some of the early records, I mean, it just sounds like to me, like children picking up. I mean, we were pretty good at playing our instruments, but like we were definitely trying to look at them kind of fresh. And I feel like some of those early records sound like pretty childlike in a way that I'm proud of. But I think it reflects on us trying to strip away, I don't know, trying to look at things fresh, like we're children or something. And I think it kind of, the music feels like that. That was one of the biggest things I remember when we first toured Japan. We had a friend, Katsuman, who was driving us around and kind of setting us up. And he of course, yeah. And he played us this like wide array of music, just in the car while we were traveling. And but he presented the music with like no context that I had ever heard before. Like, I think I kind of, I grew up in the 80s and 90s with a MTV, suburban context of music.
and he was playing stuff like Morris Day in the Time. I was like, oh, it's the bad guy from Purple Rain. Like, okay, like I would never have more than 5 seconds of interest to like, or to really like, but he presented the music in this almost kind of academic sort of way, and gave the backstory. Well, Prince wrote this, and this was Prince's alter ego, and he created this thing, and this became this like well fleshed out sort of thesis statement. And I went away loving. I was like, wow, like, but I felt like there was a moment, and it wasn't. I think childlike is the first sort of thing that hits, but there's another way of looking at it with just a truly objective, to try to remove that that subjective planning or filter, as best as you can. And I really just felt like, wow, that is such a creative, or such just the whole world becomes very, very fresh and new. And if you can just downsize your filter of your experience that you bring to any art.
Yeah, I was pretty idealistic about that stuff back then. Like, yeah, it's hard for me to even get into the headspace I was in, but I kind of wanted to make, it's kind of like what we were talking about before the podcast, like make music that wasn't a part of any tribe or part of,
oh, right, yeah.
Even though it ended up being that, weirdly, you can't get away from that. But I like wanted to just like what kind of music does a human make, like without being this time and place. But obviously I was playing an electric guitar with a drummer, and it was like, already it's like all of this rock history that you're standing on the shoulders of, and you can't just like get away. I think it was a naive idealism that I had, where I wanted us to be like totally original, and I couldn't really see how we, in a lot of ways, we will never be like that original, but
well,
but it was a heroic effort.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a motivating premise. I mean, I think that's the stuff, especially when you're young, you need the thing that gets you to take the first step towards something. And whether you ever, you achieve the goal, it's the journey, right? It's the friends you make along the way. It's, it's all the other stuff, but you need that thing to really get the ball rolling. I remember Dean and I kept saying, because we started No Age after our other band Wives broke up, and that other band Wives was a very kind of like aggressive band, and I think Dean and I were not really interested in being aggressive necessarily, or in that same sort of way. But it was, but we kept saying that we wanted to write pop songs like the band Squeeze. We had discovered Squeeze somewhere along the way of traveling, tempted by this sort of 80s British pop stuff. But we wanted to write songs like that with the noise elements that we had sort of gleaned from our time, working, volunteering, and booking, and doing sound at the Smell. The sort of like, what's the noisiest, harshest, like nastiest sounds we could make, but arrange those in a way that would still sound like a pop song. At the end of the day, you could whistle the melody of it, but it's created by feedback and distortion and kind of cacophony of sound. Yeah, that was our motivating principle, and I think it got us through a few records. And then over time, then the focus shifts or blurs or becomes something else, and the audience starts to tell you more about yourself than you even know what it is about yourself.
Yeah, it's weird. I relate to this desire to be like both offensive and accessible at the same time, and like try to find this. And I don't know what that is, because it's like, you obviously don't want to just be pandering to people and writing pop songs, and you don't want to be this like self-indulgent sort of avant-garde noisemaker that nobody cares about. So you want to try to squish them together in some way that everybody's happy, but
it's push-pull sort of thing. Yeah. But again, very, very indicative of like, I think younger, men sort of, or this kind of young man art school sort of idea of it's heavily conceptual, but almost rudimentary in execution. Like the concepts have no bound, but the physicality or the execution is nothing but elbows and thumbs in that kind of way that I think is so indicative of a young person in art school, which is great, I think can be obviously inspiring. But it's the kind of thing I'm sure now over the decades of having done this, you've matured in your view and your goals and expression and creativity have probably matured in ways where you find yourself not at odds, but in a way, how does the art evolve over time?
Yeah, I don't know.
At least that's a question I ask myself. Or does it need to evolve? Maybe it doesn't. The name of the band is maybe frozen in a time and place that's the best, the best form of it.
Because I think about that just like with myself as an artist, and then there's a lightning bolt, which is that relationship with Brian, and there's so many more forces to consider when it comes to like changing lightning bolt or evolving it into something else, because it's always a dialogue between me and Brian, and we both kind of are resistant to change in different ways. So it kind of keeps it in this one spot. Whereas as individuals, and for myself as an individual, like I'm much more wanting to almost like break my own rules. Often, like I feel like I'll have these phases of like 2 years or 3 years when I'm working on a project or projects, or like I'm doing paintings, and I'll have almost like a set of rules or a set of ideas that are guiding all my decisions. And then at some point, once I get tired of that, I almost come up with a new set of rules that thwarts everything I thought before, or I don't know. I feel like I have like these periods of sort of creative destruction in my life where I think everything I did like a year ago was really lame. And now I like this thing that I never liked before. And it's hard to describe it, and maybe that's common with people, common with artists, but
I think so. I think there's almost a sense that you're in dialogue with yourself over like a timeline in some ways, where one thing in order to find the next thing, the old thing has to be destroyed in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's similar to like the mask wearing thing, how I never wanted to have a shtick. And I think I've like allowed Lightning Bolt to have some of that. Like it's just this brand, and we do what we do. But in general, I like anytime I do something, it's like once people are asking me, do that again, like I want to do something different. Or it's just really hard to maintain
Is that
an identity creatively.
Is that in some ways motivated by the goal to express yourself in an honest way? Does it come from that, or is it more about on just in a surface level of defying expectations, or you know what I mean? I would imagine that has something to do with who you are, how you see yourself as an artist. Should be reflecting who some internal evolution.
I guess it's hard to describe, but there's a feeling of freedom of like pushing your boundaries, or there's a feeling of like growth and change and openness. And I feel like that's the highest level of art making to me, is like when you are expanding yourself a little beyond and you're not commoditizing what you do. You're not just doing it to like continue getting appreciation from people for the things they like that you did before, or like getting money for it. You're just like you're constantly entering new places, and you're constantly like, there's a feeling of freedom and kind of riskiness, instability, that is a little painful, but it also like feels more like being alive, or how being alive should feel. I'm being a little idealistic now.
Yeah. I get it though. I think there's that absolutely, of just kind of pushing yourself out there and keeping it fresh, you know?
Yeah, I'm getting into it, like conceptually I'm being idealistic, because I know that I'm not like this. A lot of the time I am like, oh, I should do it this way because I'll make more money this way or something, or I do make those really bad decisions. But when I'm at my best, or when things are like working well, I feel like I am pushing those boundaries. Yeah.
It's so tricky. I feel like at some point, you know, I don't know. It's at some point the reality of just living. I think once I became a father, I think I found myself just transitioning into a whole other kind of like mentality of just like, I really have to. It's like, there was a sense of living past myself in those kind of ways, where like, I gotta do. I have to start thinking, at least this is for me personally, I was like, I have to figure out what do these people need? Like I'm no longer just satisfying my own things. And that I think just threw everything kind of sideways and into questions of like, well, I got to provide for this other person and this other life in ways that I'd never really thought about in the past. And I don't know if I ever really will get back to anything I have, but I don't necessarily know if I miss it either. I think I was kind of at a point where I was ready to kind of be like, okay, I don't think I chose it knowing all of that, but as it was unfolding itself to me, like the amount of time and effort and energy that was being requested of me as a father is just like, oh, well, it starts to become apples and oranges. Like, but guys, I need to play guitar. Kids, can you change your own diapers and feed yourself for like 10? But I would run to the practice space. I'd run to the studio as soon as I could. I'm like, I have to get this, but just change my whole relationship with like my music practice and everything in a way where like, okay, like this is so vital to me, yet it also can't be the thing that sustains me because it's no longer the like, because I'm going to start to have to make money for this family, and that's going to just pervert the art in such a way. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make music because it's a natural part of what I need to do and not necessarily my career. If that makes sense. Even though I wish it could, there's moments of like, if everybody liked all the weird shit I made and paid me millions of dollars for it, that'd be great. But that didn't seem to, the world kind of was like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, okay. Thanks, friends. It sort of happens.
I never had kids. So I don't know if part of it was, or part of like, I don't feel like I ever made a decision one way or the other to have kids, but I know that when you go down that road, suddenly you have to take care of people. I don't know. I wonder if I've been afraid of needing to take on that much responsibility. And sometimes I think that's like a childish.
No, I think I think it's I don't know. That's a whole other conversation, I feel like.
No, it's just interesting because it's you can almost like criticize people for decisions they make, and often they've got a family to feed, and and they're doing what they have to do. Whereas when you're younger, you're just like completely self-serving, and and a lot of people that don't have kids can sort of maintain that and take a lot of risks that other people aren't able to take.
Absolutely. And I think as a younger person, I would have, had all that, I would have levied that criticism against anybody. And you could see it, you look at a lot of careers or a lot of discographies and you go, that's it. That's where there's where it started to suck. And then if you line up the biography, you can see all that kind of stuff. But ultimately I think it was for me just on such a personal level too, of like, I've seen the Eiffel Tower so many times with my bandmate. And to the point where you're just like, I don't know what this means anymore. Like there was part of the fun of starting the band and traveling and touring. We're like, look, we're going to go do things. And then you start to realize like, oh wait, we've been here. We've been here so many times. We've done this thing so many times. Like why are we even doing this now? Where it felt like that kind of strange new journey for me was like, what if I, started planting roots and try to figure out.
It's the most adventurous thing you can do is not have an adventure.
Sometimes, or at least that's where it was in my early 30s. You know what I mean? It's like been now 11 years on this family journey, and it's been great. It's been a lot of greats and the ups and downs and all the craziness and growth of it all. But it's but again, I don't think I thought about like I had to trade one for the other. But now looking back on it, it's like, oh yeah, it's just hard to maintain two things at the same time. What a luxury that is for artists who bring their kids on tour and that kind of thing. Like that's some serious flex power.
Well, I know that feeling of being on tour and sort of saying like, this isn't new anymore. This used to be so thrilling, and now I kind of understand everything that's about to happen, and there's very few surprises. And I don't know if you can engineer around that. Like, our early tours involved so much chaos and playing in alleyways, and we played in a lot of like weirder spots because we were a smaller band. We just like made random connections, and people asked us to play on like in a field on a stage somewhere or behind their house, or we wouldn't have places to stay, and there actually was a ton of novelty that I'm sure if we toured that way again, we could it could be a lot. There could be a lot of unpredictability and novelty happening all the time. But it would also just be, well, I just feel like I'm too old for that.
Yeah. There's
almost 50, so.
There's those lines. Yeah, we did a tour with Devin, Gary, and Ross. It was Devin Flynn, Gary Panter, and why am I spacing on Ross? His last name. But do you know Devin Flynn?
Oh yeah,
maybe yeah, of course, yeah.
I love Devin. Yeah.
So, but Gary Panter was great. I mean, he was quite a few years older than everybody else in the band and everyone else on the tour. But we played a garage in Arcadia, up in like Humboldt area. It was in the middle of a field in this kid's garage, and it was great. And Gary liked to smoke a lot of weed and just kind of hang out but he would start drawing on this kid's, like, because there was tons of graffiti and stuff just drawn on this garage, and he started drawing on it. I'm like, holy shit, this is like original like Gary Panter art on this kid's garage. This is on the drywall. Like, there was a part of me like, I want to like get a saw and cut this out. Like, this kid doesn't even know what he has on this wall now. This is so cool. But I think Gary got a big kick out of it, but it wasn't something he was trying to do as a career or for money. I think it was almost kind of like a, post-retirement sort of vacation. What if I just jumped in a van with my friends and played some shows up the coast? Yeah, it's amazing. It was really fun. I want to ask you so many questions, going back into starting in the RISD days, but I want to fulfill our premise of video game. I want to make sure we get to that. And so let's jump straight to there. What is Thumper, and what was your path into video games? How did you become involved in the video game world? I know nothing about video games. Well, so I was, after I graduated from RISD, I was having a really hard time finding work or knowing what I was doing with my life. I was playing with Brian, and we were like I was losing money with Lightning Bolt because I was blowing speakers all the time, and I was working at a coffee shop, and I was like broke. And there was a period, wait, hold on, let me check. Yeah. Just checking my battery. Oh, yeah. I guess there's just a period where I wasn't sure if I was going to make it or something. I needed to get a job. And I remember seeing Ben Jones. Do you know Ben Jones? Yes. Yeah. Who did Paper Rad. He would like go on tour, and he would play these flash animations he would make. Yep. And I always thought he was really interesting because all of our friends were doing screen printing and painting and sculpture and stuff, and he was like making art on a computer that actually seemed really interesting to me, and he was like touring with it and showing it at Fort Thunder, and I felt like he was developing this skill that seemed like it was aligned with where the world was going, like just digital world. He just kind of like opened that up to me as like, oh, maybe that's not that uncool to like get into computer stuff. And so I started making some animations at the RISD computer lab. I didn't have my own computer, but I tried to learn Flash and just make some animations. And that's when I had this band, Barclay's Barnyard Critters, where I dressed up like a dog and like would drink with my friends, and we would act like these animal characters. And I started making these animations that were based around those characters, using my friends as the voices. And I just vaguely had this thought, like, this is probably a path to like getting money in this day and age, is like having some of these computer skills and like trying to bring together my art skill with some technical knowledge. And so it turned out that there was someone who graduated a few years ahead of me named Ryan Lesser, who is the art director at Harmonix, which was a game developer up in Boston that made music games. And I was kind of aware that, I can't remember how much I knew. Oh, I knew like my friend Dare also worked there, who's someone I grew up with in Vermont, actually. But I kind of knew about these guys that were working at this game developer, and I bumped into Ryan one day
just like walking down the street, and I was like, "Hey, do you have any jobs for me?" I remember I was just like kind of desperate looking for jobs, and he was like, "I don't know. Why don't we talk about that? Like, let's get together and talk about it." And I showed him. I think he came to where I was staying, and I showed him some of the Barclays animation that I was making, and he was like, "Yeah, it seems like you're ready to have a job. Why don't you come check out what we're doing?" And I didn't really know anything about video games, but I went there, and I was kind of like interning for a few months, and they were giving me little jobs like modeling, trying to 3D model something, and I didn't really know how to do 3D modeling, but I kind of figured out how to make something using 3D Studio Max, and it was all really terrible, and I'm really thankful that they sort of stuck with me, because I feel like I was like a slow learner, but yeah, over time they like started to appreciate the contributions I was making. The one thing that I was pretty good at that like a lot of the other artists there weren't that good at, I think, was developing some rapport with the programmers and appreciating what they do in a way that it seemed like a lot of the artists at Harmonix would kind of just want to focus on the art and hunker down and not really interact with the programming side as much. As such different personality types. And I actually really liked the programmers, and I really liked how you could sort of conspire with them to create something that you wouldn't be able to create on your own, because they could like develop some little piece of code that would make the thing you're making operate and do the thing you want it to do. And you could sort of do things. They just added this like power to the programmers there were just incredibly powerful engineers. They're like top of the class MIT guys. At least that's how wild. I perceived it.
But it makes sense from a design perspective if you understand mechanics or sort of what how to exploit what they're doing, for good. Like, well, I can make this thing do this weird thing. You're like, but where's the design or where's the art in that? But if you understand what their tool set is, right, or in some way have that relationship of like the construction, and then apply any kind of artistic sort of gamification, right, to that. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that developer, there was these engineers who didn't really know exactly what they should be working on, and there was these artists that like had all these ideas, and they needed to be interacting with each other to make a good product. But and then there were these producers that were kind of going back and forth, talking to the engineers, talking to the artists, like sort of being this communication bridge between the two. But it just was uncommon that like an artist would actually walk over to like one of the engineers' desks and like have a conversation with them about this thing. And I found that if you did that, you could like kind of make cooler stuff. And that's cool. And the engineers really appreciated it, because they actually kind of wanted to be creatively involved, or they wanted to be involved with the artist, but didn't know how to talk to them. And then it might have been both, maybe both sides were kind of intimidated by the skills that the other had. And I felt like that was, if there was anything that like made it so they were like, oh yeah, let's hire, and it was because I was doing that. Like, I didn't feel like I was a particularly good artist or like, I didn't think the art I was making was, I mean, I definitely had imposter syndrome while I was there, because I felt like I was not great at modeling, and just really working really hard to sort of keep up. But
you had people skills.
Yeah, and I don't consider myself someone with people skills, but I do have like maybe a programmer brain a little bit or something, or I just like am sympathetic to that kind of brain, and I really appreciate what they did. So, but yeah, that was how I got that job. And so like I worked there for like 15 years.
What were the games that you worked on in that time?
When I started working there, they were doing Amplitude, which was the follow-up to their first game called Frequency, which was it was like Guitar Hero, but more abstract.
Oh, cool.
Where you're just like a spaceship flying down a path and shooting the notes of the music that's playing. And after that, they got into this other, there's like Karaoke Revolution, which I didn't love working on. It was a little bit generic, but, and then they did another game called Anti-Grav, which was like you're going around on a hoverboard. And around then is when they started doing Guitar Hero, which I didn't work on that project very much. I can't remember. I might have done a couple little things on it, but that game blew up.
That was the one that sort of put them on the map in a global way.
Yeah.
Wow. But you didn't get to pick out which Aerosmith songs that you get to play in Guitar Hero?
No.
Like, hey guys, as a professional musician, let me tell you, we definitely need Walk This Way.
Yeah, no, I had very little hand in that game. Actually, that game was, to me, it was like very much Ryan Lesser's game, who's the guy who hired me. That was something that really brought out his, like, if he didn't work at Harmonix, I don't think that game would have been as authentic as it was, because he was a real rocker. And
What a trip.
I think a lot of what allowed him to feel comfortable inviting me to Harmonix was he knew Lightning Bolt. So he knew I was like, he appreciated it. He was like a band guy, and he kind of knew that I was like, I don't know, that was some proof that I had some creativity or something.
Yeah.
Aside from the few like Flash animations I had made, he was just like, oh yeah, Brian seems like he's probably could come up with something. I hired him.
But it's cool to have that awareness, with a job, with an employer that, like, oh, cool, I know your band, I like it, versus the other side of the way it goes, or the other way it can go, where the employer has no idea what you've done, and there's a sort of feeling of suppression from the artist side of like, oh, I'm just going in here, no one knows what I've done for the last 10 years of my life.
Oh yeah, no, it was amazing because I had this great relationship with Ryan because we were. And Dare, who also was on the art team. There are a few people at Harmonix that we were like a part of this Providence scene, and we understood each other in this way because we saw each other at shows and we were all in bands. But then there was like 90% of that company that I felt very much like people didn't know where I was coming from. But because Ryan Lesser was the art director, he was like on my side. So I kind of stuck out there as being one of the more, I don't know, just like eccentric, non-corporate people. And I think it did rub some people the wrong way, but I think Ryan really was like, no, Brian's good.
He had your back.
He had my back.
That's cool. And then from there, where does you develop Thumper on your own, or how does that evolve?
I think, maybe around like 2013. I'm not sure the exact day, the exact year, but I mean, getting into video games was amazing. And at some point I was like, it would just be really cool to like make one from scratch and have it be something crazy, not this. I felt like the stuff that Harmonix was doing was great, but it was all very accessible and it was very tuned to be as accessible as possible. And just from being in Lightning Bolt, I was like, there's so much possibility here to do like really unique, weird, crazy art. And I didn't feel like, for a long time, I understood how games work or how to make them. But maybe around, 2013 or something, which was like, I started working there in 2001, so maybe around 10 years of working there, I was like feeling pretty confident that I understood game development. And actually, the way it really started was I pitched the game at Harmonix. I pitched this idea for Thumper. So I guess I didn't originally know that I was going to peel away and do it on my own. I was hoping that I could like get Harmonix to make a game that was my idea, and I like made a little video of what I thought. It's hard to describe. It doesn't really look like what Thumper looked like in the end, but I made this video of a creature going along a path, and it was like, to me, one of the core ideas in Thumper is that it's not like multiple tracks. It's like just this pounding note, and it's more about like getting the intervals right, and a much simpler kind of rhythm game. Usually rhythm games are kind of complicated to me. Like there's multiple buttons, and this was just like do the right thing at the right time, and it's just one thing that you do.
More intuitive feeling, like you're interacting with the game in a kind of the way you would play an instrument, or closer to that.
Yeah, and I think it was really informed by Lightning Bolt to me, which is like it's a two-piece. Like I felt like everybody at Harmonix thought of music as you have the guitar and the vocals and the blah 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 and the blah blah blah, and I was really into just like no, you just have like a kick drum and a really distorted sound, and that's like all you need to like make people go crazy. And
like I have proof. I've seen this work. It actually happens.
Right. Yeah. No. It was definitely like my experience of music was like way more primitive and simple, and I kind of wanted a game that conveyed that primitive simplicity of just like a rhythm that's not even a polyrhythm. It's just a pounding downbeat, you know, and you just have to like follow that. And but the way I had it at the time, it was like a creature on a landscape, and there was these little thumps that you would like encounter, and you had to hit the button when you hit them, and then you'd have to turn and sort of get to the next one. And it ended up being even more constrained than that initial video. But I made that and had some meetings at Harmonix, and they were kind of like curious about maybe pursuing it as a project for the company. But I think like I was waiting for like a year for them to sort of green light it, or there's some internal process for starting new games. And at some point I realized that it was just like they were not going to make it. So I went to the management at Harmonix and I was like, is it okay if I just make this game on my own? And if you guys want it while I'm working on it, you guys can have it. But I just really want to see this game. And they were like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's really hard to sell a game, but you can try.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, then there was some programmers at Harmonix. There was one, Mark Fleury, that worked there that I talked to about it. Actually, Dare told me that I should talk to Mark Fleury. And he's a really cool guy, and he's kind of a freak. So he understood. He knew Lightning Bolt. He knew what I was getting at with it, and he was pretty excited to make his own game engine. He had a bunch of things he wanted to do independently too. So it's like, yeah, let's just work together on this project. We'll tinker on it on the weekends. And so, yeah, that was maybe 2013, 2014. And we spent, it was ended up being a 7-year project. We thought it would take a year, but it really dragged on. And while we were doing it, we would periodically show Harmonix what we were doing, just so they, you know, if they wanted to
sure,
have it. Yeah, they never wanted it, and
well, good for you. I mean, that probably works out a lot better for you, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think in the beginning I thought we would need some big, you know, backing by a big company to sell it, or like there would be a lot of complicated stuff we wouldn't be able to handle. But it turned out being for the best, that we just ended up finishing the game and releasing it by ourselves. And yeah, that was definitely a much better outcome.
Did Harmonix ever come back and say, "Oh yeah"? Like,
there was some agreement that we made that I can't really get into. That
okay. Everybody was happy.
Everybody was happy, but yeah, they never. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think they. In some ways, I just don't think it. Even though it was a huge, amazing thing for Mark and I to have released that game, and it sold pretty well. If it was a Harmonix game, there's 100 employees there. I don't know how many employees there.
Right, yeah. The overhead that they have to, for something to be a success for them, it has to be in the millions and billions of dollars. Whereas for a two-man operation, you can, much like Lightning Bolt or you know, an independent band, you know, low overhead, 2 people. You can make a little money go a lot longer, a lot further.
Yeah. No, I have an appreciation that maybe I didn't have when I worked there for what the management team at Harmonix are up against. Like, they have all of these people with families and salaries, and there's a reason why they are trying to make the most accessible games possible. I thought it just was a reflection of a lack of creativity, but like, people running those businesses have huge responsibilities.
It has to be successful on scale to an order of magnitude that like can sustain that whole ship.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I'm really glad I left and made my own game, because it became clear to me, like, oh, I didn't belong there. It was great. I learned a lot there. What they do is great, but it's really great that I left to do the thing that I want to do and didn't try to just do it there, because it probably would have made everybody unhappy and they wouldn't have made enough money from it. And it makes me kind of want to evangelize to people, like, if they're in that kind of situation, like, go do your own thing. Because you can, like, it can work out. I don't know how many, if I was to do it 100 times, like how many times, if you were to run a simulation where I left Harmonix to make my own game, like how many times it would work out. Like, maybe I got really lucky. But,
right time and place. But I think it is a good note, though, still always, if you have something, a passion or a desire, if you can, it doesn't have to be made on a huge scale. You know what I mean? I feel like that was a huge part of my own development of, like, knowing, like, having appropriate expectations of knowing like what is considered a success. And I think that gets confused a lot, I think, for younger generations, or at least I see with my kids or with other people, but it's a different world. But the idea of like, oh, these people look like millionaires on social media, and it's like, they're not. It's all smoke and mirrors, so the idea of being successful can be really small. I think I've developed an appreciation for that, I think, in those early touring days too. Like, you'd stay at somebody's house and it's like, they have a warm house with a coffee maker and a car that runs, or so, there was a level of like, this band is really successful. They made $100 last night and their car, didn't break down on the way to the show. Okay. These are the bare minimums for survival. However, they are accomplishing those, and that kind of stuff of, like, just appreciating what that looks like, and they're happy. They wake up smiling, and they're not grinding themselves to a nub every day in some job they hate. There's these levels of, like, success. It's not traditional or financial, but it's this kind of creative success can be very fulfilling, but it just looks a lot different.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, just finding yourself in a place in life where you have freedom, to me, it's just the most valuable thing beyond anything else. And if you have some modest income, but you're doing what you want to be doing, it's so much better than, like, making a lot of money doing something where you just feel like you don't have any freedom.
Yeah. I remember those early days. I after the band Wives broke up, I started substitute teaching. So we'd been playing for about 5 years at that point, and had toured a bunch and had no money, and I'd racked up a bunch of credit card debt. And so I got a job where I was substitute teaching long term. So I was working, I got a paycheck every 2 weeks, which is, and I was able to, I made an Excel spreadsheet of how long it would take to pay off these, like, predatory like student credit card debts that I had accumulated, where it was like 32% interest because I'd missed a payment or something insane. So I didn't even understand at the time. It was about survival and being broke and trying to buy a beer in Milwaukee or something. Like, I'll just put on a credit card, and that so I was about $5,000 in debt. But for a 24-year-old, that was like, insurmountable.
Your life is over.
It was never, and I was making, $200 a day or $200 a week or something. It was working minimum wage job. So the substitute job, I got paid just enough to sort of, like, okay, I can pay rent and pay down this credit card thing. So I made a graph. It would take me a year and a half to pay this whole thing off if I just threw all the money at it. Like, every time I got a check, I just threw it at the credit card, and the rest of it I just paid rent and lived pretty much broke how I had lived before. But at least I was able to I'd had to forget that I ever made the money. It was like, doesn't even exist. It just all goes to the credit card. I drew like little fangs on the credit card. I made it look like this like monster. In my, I had to visualize it. I had to kind of anthropomorphize it in some way. Like, this credit card is a thing that's like a vampire draining me. Like, this is a horrible thing. Don't be friends with this thing anymore. It's a monster.
That's amazing.
When I paid it off, the day I paid it off, it was one of the happiest days of my life. And we were just about to go on tour. I ended up quitting. It all worked out like relatively great. Like, we're going on tour in Europe to open for our friend's band Mika Mika. We were going to be the opening act, and my contract ran out on my substitute job. So it all kind of like tied up in this way. We're like, I'm leaving this job. I was here for a year and a half. I paid off all of my credit cards. I'm officially broke. I'm at zero. I'm in no debt, and we're going to go sleep on floors in Europe and opened up for our friend. That was in 2007. Whew.
Wow.
That was one of my big successes as a young adult. Now, by that point, so I went from like 24 to 26, and in that time, it felt like I was like, okay, I learned a hard lesson, and like, it was hard, but I did.
Yeah, it's funny. That's around when I kind of learned similar lessons. Like 25, I think around the year 2000, it was like before 9/11. I think I was playing with Brian, and I had like a $500 amp, and it would blow up, and it would be like $400 to fix.
Oh God!
And so I wouldn't buy a new amp. I would just fix that one.
You could have bought 10 amps.
And so I just was constantly saving up to fix this amp, and it kept blowing up. Like,
what kind of amp was it?
It was a Hartkey 3500.
Oh God! Motherfucker!
It would fry, and I don't know. Like, I sometimes suspected that the guy that was fixing it was like had some
fuse
switch
in there or something. Yeah,
he had a fuse in there, so I would keep coming back. But I kept coming back to him, and there was a point where I was like, I have to quit this band. I mean, I'm just stuck. Like, because we weren't making money from our shows, and so I moved to New York and lived with some friends. I slept on a couch at some friend's place, and I got this random job painting a mural for Saul LeWitt, who's like a famous.
Oh yeah.
It was actually a giant mural that he was putting up inside the World Trade Center.
Whoa.
And there was like a team of 20 of us that were like painting these giant tiles that would get assembled. And I had a friend that had, gone to Yale painting, in the Yale painting program, and she was working on this thing, and she got me on that. And I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life, which was probably like $15 an hour or something.
Yeah.
But by 6 months, I had saved $10,000 working on that. And then the project was over. And I was like, I can go back to Providence and play with Brian again and buy a really nice amp, and that will never blow. And it's just funny, like, back then, that was such a huge investment. Like,
yeah.
And such a major life decision. But I did. I moved back to Providence, and that's when I bought like a subwoofer cabinet and a 4x10 and a Ampeg SVT 1200 watt amp, which is 4 times bigger than the amp I was using.
It sounds better anyway. It has tubes.
It sounded better.
Yeah.
That was, and then we recorded Ride the Skies, and you could hear the bass. Like, everything was, but it's a different from your story about the credit card debt. But it was a weird point in my life when I just kind of dug myself out of this financial hole, and then kind of was able to sort of catapult to this other level. And then things kind of snowballed from there. It got a lot better after that.
Yeah. So that age, yeah. Because I think it was, when the one band broke up before we started the next band, it was that feeling too, like Dean was going to maybe open up a haircutting franchise, like a Supercuts or something with his dad, because his dad said that was a good business to be in or something. So Dean was going to all these meetings with his dad about trying to open up a haircutting salon or something, and I'm substitute teaching. But it was that feeling of we should just start another band. You don't really it was that kind of we're not done yet. That band is done, but we could start something else. There was a whole different future ahead of us of me teaching and him owning a fleet of mall haircut shops. But I don't think either one of us really wanted that. We weren't ready to give up on it yet, but it really had to sort of learn from our mistakes, or learn from the, just how hard, take the lessons, take it on the chin, like take all of our bruises and everything we lost and did wrong, and all the mistakes we made with that first band, and then just don't do those this time. Like, be smarter. Try to be smarter with the next thing you do. Don't make the same mistakes twice. Wow, it's incredible. Well, we're coming up on the hour. This has been it's flown by. I feel like there's a million other things we could talk about.
Wow. But I didn't realize it was just an hour.
Yeah. I feel like that's, I don't want to keep it for too long, but it's been incredible. It's been so fun talking. We should definitely do it again. Yeah. I thought it was going to be more about the multitasking aspect of having multiple projects. We didn't really get into that, but I know we should. I like the biography of the story too a lot, though, too, where it just kind of shows how we did it. But no, the more nuts and bolts. Maybe there's an additional. Maybe that we could say that one for another episode in the future. I feel like I have to get the more the toolbox. Maybe that's the Patreon episode I can launch. People more like a lesson learning thing, how to actually do all this stuff at once.
There is a lot there about the dynamic between Brian and working with Lightning Bolt and then working at Harmonix, and a lot of tension between us because I had a corporate job, and then also really fighting hard to let Harmonix allow me to go on tour while having a salary. Like, that was a super, but I don't know, I had pretty strong principles. Like, I don't think I was lucky that Ryan was there to advocate for me, because I think he knew that Lightning Bolt was like significant for me, and I probably wouldn't work there if I couldn't do Lightning Bolt. So they really gave me a lot of freedom, which was unbelievable.
It's huge.
I felt really lucky
in that world. Yeah, I've had a few weird day jobs, while having the band and stuff. And it's usually I was lucky enough to find a few things that were always kind of temporary, but it was always felt like whatever value I'm bringing to that job was because I was in this band. So it was in their best interest if I could go out and I could report. I can work from a laptop in the airport or from a hotel lobby or something. But yeah. It's hard. All of this stuff, those compromises, I feel like that's the stuff that, turns you into this adult,
Definitely.
Yeah. I always think about that with the kids too. It's like, I don't think anybody ever sets out to be a dad or to talk like a dad or look like a dad, but something, the children, the experience of raising them turns you into a dad. By then you're like, where these cargo shorts come from? Why do I have reasonable, comfortable shoes on? Like, oh no, it's just the last thing you want to do is be worried about feet while you're cleaning up diapers and going to soccer practice. So we're so like beholden to biological forces that we don't have any control over, and I think we don't. And it's probably very universal what men go through when they become fathers, like the subtle changes that happen to your priorities and your psychology, and but even even without kids too, I think just turning somewhere around 35, my like the metabolism just told me to go fuck myself. I'm like, I don't work for you anymore. There's no metabolism. I'm like, what do you mean? I would eat this whole pizza and I'd be fine. And now I eat a slice of pizza and I gained 10 pounds. I was like, that didn't used to be that way. Definitely. But I think the one positive thing that I've gotten as I've gotten older is like more conscientiousness. Oh. But so like paired with my metabolism being worse is like a little bit more motivation to take care of myself. Luckily, so at least they're good. Kind of that's like an equilibrium that I have, because I used to not take care of myself, but I had a really good metabolism that could handle anything. It didn't matter. Yeah, I think my nihilism kind of and immaturity sort of doubled down on that metabolism. It's like, oh, well, you're not going to work for me anywhere. Well, I'm going to go ahead and eat a giant bowl of Fruit Loops. How do you like that metabolism? Like, I got to buy a bigger pair of jeans. Hold on, this isn't working out. Yeah, stuff can spiral easily. It's easy to do. Once you break the balance, it's easy to keep going in that direction, the down direction. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Brian, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on. We should definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun to talk. Yeah, definitely. Anytime. That's great. Awesome. All right, man. We'll take care. Okay. See you. Yes, Brian Gibson, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And remember, you can go to thumpergame.com to learn more about Thumper. And while you're on the interweb, why don't you go to laserbeast.com as well to find out more about what Lightning Bolt is doing and when they will be in a city near you. Yeah. Thank you to everybody who came on this incredible video game themed journey with me this month. It's definitely going out of my comfort zone, which is fun, and I'm excited to do more of this year. Try new things, interview new people, reach out and touch someone, find something new, find something in the dark out there that gives me hope and purpose and meaning. And yeah, I don't know. That shouldn't be so dark. It's really good to have this podcast format set up, and it's fun to get to connect with people. And I don't know what I'm trying not to say. I just feel like the news it just feels like every day there's something. So I'm just, struggling with putting on that face. I'm like, hey, everybody, listen to this. We got a fun podcast. Oh, right. Whoa, here we go. I'm just feeling a little fed up, and it already feels early in the year. So I hope you are doing well. Remember, you can write the show hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com and let me know what you're up to. Send demos this way, send questions, send guest recommendations. Let me know if you like the show. Let me know if you don't like the show. Let me know anything. I don't know. I'm just here hanging out. I will see you on Monday with my co-host Aaron Farley for the halftime wrap-up. Hope you have a good weekend. Stay good, stay warm, stay positive. Bye.
What kind of music does a human make?